I lived with that man for 25 years. I thought we were preparing for early retirement, buying an RV and exploring America. Until one autumn morning, I discovered we hadn't paid our federal taxes for 3 years, and we were over $150,000 in credit card debt, all under both our names. He sat in the kitchen, silent, saying nothing. And me? I realized I had bet my entire life on the wrong person. My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm 52 years old and live in a quiet suburb of Indianapolis, Indiana. I work in administration at a local high school. My husband, Mark, is a civil engineer. We got married when we were 27. I thought we were living the American dream: 2-story house, 2 cars, a shared retirement account, and weekends spent gardening together. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable. Every month, I carefully reviewed our savings, contributed to our 401k, and kept our household budget neatly organized in an Excel sheet. But when it came to the big stuff, I trusted Mark completely. He handled the taxes, the mortgage, the insurance. I just signed the papers. Last summer, we even talked about retiring early at 60. Mark wanted to buy a used RV and travel along Route 66. I dreamed of a little cabin by Lake Michigan where I could read books and teach the neighborhood kids how to paint. I thought we were a team, trusting, aligned, sharing everything. Until one October morning, I received a letter from the IRS. This wasn't some small clerical error. They were coming after us for over $40,000 in unpaid taxes, plus interest and penalties. While searching for documents, I opened the filing cabinet drawer where Mark kept his papers, one I hadn't touched in years. And that's when I saw them. Warning letters from credit card companies, personal loan statements, attorney invoices. Each letter cut deeper into the trust one had built over nearly 3 decades. Mark sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I asked him what was going on. He said only one sentence. "I thought I could fix it before you found out." I stood frozen. We didn't have $150,000 in our accounts. We barely had $40,000 in retirement savings. I wasn't even sure there was an us anymore. I called the bank, then the credit card companies, then a tax accountant. Each phone call peeled back another layer of truth. The debts had been accumulating for almost 4 years. More than 6 different credit accounts, joint accounts. Some personal loans were co-signed by Mark using my name, all for easier approval. I hadn't known about any of them, but they were all legally binding because I had signed a financial power of attorney back in 2015. Blind trust. But the most devastating part wasn't the amount. It was Mark's silence. He hadn't cheated. He wasn't an addict. He'd just made a string of bad investments, penny stocks, shady crypto schemes, even a startup pitched by an old college friend. Every time he lost money, he hid it. Every time he hoped to make it back, he borrowed more. He said, "I didn't want you to worry." But the truth is, he left me to carry the burden, completely unaware. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in our bedroom. I looked around, the family photos, our wedding clock on the wall, the running shoes Mark wore when we walked together every Sunday morning. Suddenly, everything felt fake. I thought I'd been careful. I thought I had a plan. But clearly, I had no idea about the reality of our finances. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I called a divorce attorney. I don't know what hurt more, Mark's betrayal, or the fact that I had to turn to the law to protect myself from the man I had once trusted with everything. And that was the moment I knew I would never let anyone else control my finances again. I used to think I was strong. But when I walked out of that divorce attorney's office, with the paperwork still unsigned, I felt like my whole world had just fallen apart. I didn't cry, not there. I couldn't. I was a 52-year-old woman, hair streaked with gray, dressed neatly, standing on a downtown Indianapolis sidewalk with no idea where I would sleep that night. Because that house I once thought of as my home, was under both our names. And now the lawyer advised me to leave immediately before Mark could take out another loan or leverage it without my consent. She was around 60, sharp-eyed, and brutally honest. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Karen, I know this is hard, but if you stay, you could lose everything. This is not the time to be soft." So I left. With one suitcase of clothes, a box of documents, and less than $2,000 in my personal checking account. I rented a small motel room on the south side of the city. The walls were paper-thin. The fluorescent lights flickered. The window looked out onto a trash-strewn parking lot. I hadn't lived like this since college. I opened the box of papers and flipped through them. Debt lists, IRS emails, credit reports. And then, all of a sudden, I broke down in tears. Not because of Mark, but because of me. I had handed over my entire life, my finances, my decision-making to someone else. And now I had nothing. I called my daughter, Emily, who lives in Chicago, and lied. I told her I just needed some space. I didn't want her to worry. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the stiff motel bed and reopened the attorney's file. That's when I saw it, proof that many of the debts were joint, thanks to the financial power of attorney I had signed 10 years ago. If I didn't act quickly, I'd be legally liable for all of it under Indiana law. So I began listing every debt, every asset, every document I still had. I made a spreadsheet on my old laptop, and for the first time in nearly 30 years, I took control of my finances. I knew I had lost my husband. I might lose my house. And the stability I thought would carry me into retirement? Gone. But somewhere deep inside me, something switched on. Something like survival instinct. I officially filed for divorce in early November. We filed under irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, a common reason in Indiana. No infidelity. No abuse. Just debts and silence that killed the relationship. Mark hired his own attorney. His lawyer argued that most of the debt had been incurred for our shared future, so I should share the responsibility. I was too angry to speak. But the truth was, many of the loans had my signature. The law didn't care if I had known or not. In the eyes of the American legal system, I was an adult, responsible for what I signed. I suggested we divide the assets by selling the house, painful as it was, and splitting whatever was left. The lawyer told me it was the only way to avoid getting dragged down by the loans Mark was still hiding. But that house was where I raised my daughter. It was the place I once dreamed of growing old with the man I loved. Now, it would be auctioned off to pay debts, like some used piece of furniture. I called the bank to ask for a deferral on my car loan, denied. My credit score had dropped sharply after Mark defaulted on multiple accounts. I lost my primary credit card. The account was closed. Even the local grocery store near where I lived declined my card, saying there was a credit irregularity flagged in the local banking system. I used to be the kind of woman who was organized and always had a plan. Now I was counting coins to buy dinner. I signed up for a night shift at a public library, doing data entry for a nonprofit project. Every night, I sat alone in a dimly lit room, surrounded by old financial documents, trying to teach myself how money worked, how the system worked, and how it had once operated quietly behind my back. And then came the invisible losses. Old friends, couples we used to picnic and grill with suddenly became distant. Some didn't know what to say. Some simply chose to side with Mark. They told me I was overreacting because at least he didn't cheat. I felt invisible. A middle-aged woman left behind in the wreckage of a life no one wanted to see. But I didn't give up. In the loneliness, the poverty, the shame, I started relearning everything from the ground up, about money, about the law, and about myself. I remember that night clearly, a Friday in January, heavy snow falling in Indiana. I had just finished a shift at the library. It was pitch black and bone-chilling cold. When I got back to the motel, I saw a text from the bank. Savings account ending in 4821 has been closed due to a balance under $25 for over 60 days. It was the last account in my name, the one where I'd been keeping the scraps from a part-time accounting job. About $68. I'd planned to use it to buy a new pair of shoes. The only pair I owned had started coming apart after 3 months of walking to work every day. I sat down on the motel floor, still in my coat, staring blankly at my phone screen. The cold seeped into my bones. And I couldn't even cry. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was emptiness. I had lost my husband, lost my home, lost my friends, lost even my self-respect. A part of me started asking terrifying questions. If I disappeared from the world, would anyone notice? That was the first time I truly understood what despair felt like. Not the dramatic sobbing you see in movies, but silence. A silence so deep you start hearing your own heartbeat pounding slowly, as if your body itself is asking, "What now?" I looked at myself, 52 years old, no retirement, no home, no plan, no future. I had always thought I was doing okay. I wasn't extravagant. I was careful, frugal. But I had never planned for the possibility that everything could fall apart, because I believed in marriage. I believed in stability. I believed that if I lived a good life, life would be good in return. I was wrong. That night, I wrote an email to Emily, my daughter, and confessed everything, that I was in debt, living in a motel, and had no idea how I was going to make it. I apologized for lying to her for the past 3 months. I wasn't asking for money. I just wanted her to know her mother had failed. Then I hit send, turned off my phone, and sat there in the cold room, wind whistling through the window cracks. I thought, so this is the bottom. And yet, in that moment, a small voice stirred in my mind. Something my mother used to tell me when I was little, back when she too had gone through divorce and bankruptcy. When you hit rock bottom, that's also where you can start to stand. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. I was still alive. And if I was still alive, I still had a choice. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. Not because I felt better, because I hadn't slept. My head was spinning with 100 questions. But one new thought slipped in. I can't just sit here. I have to do something. Even the smallest thing. I turned on my phone. There was an email from Emily. Just one line. "Mom, I'm not mad. I believe you'll get through this. But what you need is a plan, not an apology." Strangely, it was my daughter, the one I thought I needed to protect, who lit the first spark in me. A plan. I had nothing else, but I could start with the only 2 things I still had, my time and my mind. I went to the nearest public library, not to work, but to learn. They had a free program called Smart Money for Women Over 50, run by a nonprofit foundation. I signed up immediately. The first session was about how to read your credit report and rebuild your finances from zero. I sat there, surrounded by other women, some widowed, some bankrupt, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. The instructor, a retired lawyer, said something I'll never forget. Finance is knowledge, not luck. If you learn it, you can survive it. I began reviewing all my credit reports from Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. I asked to volunteer for help disputing debts that weren't truly mine. Most were in Mark's name, though he'd used our joint identity. I learned how to write dispute letters, send certified mail, and track every response. It took a full month, but I did it. One of the credit bureaus agreed to remove 2 accounts after I proved I hadn't signed for them. That raised my credit score from 512 to 563, still low, but enough to get a $300 secured credit card. It was the first card I had after losing all my accounts. I used it responsibly, just gas, paid in full each month. I tracked every expense. No more spend now, figure it out later. I discovered apps like Mint and Inab. You need a budget. I watched YouTube videos of other American women who had rebuilt their lives after bankruptcy. I cut every corner I could, packed lunch for work, wore old clothes, and moved in with a divorced nurse who was also rebuilding financially. No one came to rescue me. There were no miracles. But every small step I took, I chose it. And strangely, that gave me a quiet sense of pride. I'm no longer the woman who was left behind. I'm becoming the woman who knows how to stand up on her own. After several weeks of sticking with finance courses and working daily to rebuild my credit, I started to see a faint light at the end of the tunnel. My credit score began to rise, still not great, but just high enough to qualify me for a small loan for low-income individuals. I decided to enroll in a free basic investment course at a local community center. That was the first time I truly understood concepts like index funds, compound interest, and the importance of portfolio diversification. The course didn't just teach me how to grow wealth, it opened my mind to managing risk and planning for the long term. At the same time, I landed a part-time job at a law office, handling administrative tasks. It wasn't my dream job, but it gave me some steady income to cover essentials and continue learning. More importantly, I began to rebuild my relationship with my daughter, Emily. I was honest about our financial situation, no more hiding or avoiding the truth. Together, we planned our budget, started saving, and set small financial goals to work toward stability. It made me feel like I wasn't alone on this journey anymore. I also started joining support groups for middle-aged women on Facebook and online forums. There, I found people in similar situations, sharing experiences and encouraging one another through tough times. That connection gave me a sense of strength, not just financially, but emotionally. Though many difficult days still lie ahead, these small wins sparked a belief in me that I could rebuild my life. From those wobbly first steps, I learned that patience and determination are the real keys to unlocking the future. Just as I started to feel more stable with my part-time job and basic financial knowledge, new challenges quickly appeared, like a reminder that this journey wouldn't be easy. First came the time pressure. As a 52-year-old woman juggling work, financial courses, self-care, and maintaining a bond with my daughter, I often found myself completely exhausted. Long evenings sitting in front of a computer watching online lectures, while my body and mind cried out for rest, sometimes made me doubt whether I could keep going. Money was still extremely tight. My part-time income barely covered the basics: rent, food, and transportation. I had to budget down to the last cent whenever my car broke down or I needed a medical checkup. I'd scramble to figure out how to pay for it, since I had no real emergency fund. Another challenge was my lack of legal knowledge about the benefits and support available to middle-aged people rebuilding their lives. At first, I didn't even know I might qualify for government programs like Medicaid, SNAP, food stamps, or tuition assistance. I had to spend a lot of time researching through nonprofit organizations and community centers to understand these benefits and how to apply for them. Most of all, the loneliness and emotional pressure weighed heavily. Divorce didn't just take away material things, it disrupted my entire social circle. Old friends rarely reached out, they didn't know what to say. And I hesitated to open up, afraid of getting hurt. On lonely nights, I often asked myself, can I really build a new life with hope and trust? But it was during the hardest moments that I realized something. Without persistence, without doing the work to understand my legal rights and the support systems available, I would have given up easily. I made the decision to spend more time attending free workshops about labor laws, workers' rights, and support for unemployed, middle-aged individuals. Understanding U.S. law gave me the confidence to advocate for myself and take steps toward rebuilding my life. I also learned to manage my time better, setting small weekly goals and not being afraid to ask for help. Slowly, I began rebuilding a social network by connecting with people in similar situations and professionals in finance and law. These challenges were far from easy, but every time I overcame one, I felt myself grow closer to the financial independence and stability I was striving for. After months of wrestling with time constraints, financial stress, and emotional burnout, I began to notice the first signs of real progress in my recovery journey. It wasn't magic or a sudden leap. It was the result of steady effort and thorough preparation. One Wednesday afternoon, while I was working at the law office, I was introduced to Mrs. Janet, a longtime client and the owner of a small business specializing in natural health products. She mentioned she was looking for an assistant with organizational and financial record-keeping skills to help prepare for an upcoming business expansion. I saw this as a valuable opportunity, not just for more stable part-time income, but also to gain practical knowledge in business and corporate finance. I boldly applied, including a cover letter explaining my current circumstances and my unwavering commitment to learning. After a short but meaningful interview, I was offered the position of financial assistant. The salary wasn't high, but what mattered most was that the job aligned with both my skills and long-term goals. This new job opened up a world of business insight I'd never had access to before. I got to sit in on financial planning meetings, learn how to analyze income and expense reports, and most importantly, understand how to manage cash flow, the lifeblood of any business. Gradually, I also began building a network of professionals and partners in the small business world, from accountants to tax attorneys and investment advisors. These relationships are already proving to be crucial for my long-term financial planning. Best of all, with more stable income, I finally started making regular contributions to the IRA retirement account I had opened earlier. The amount isn't large, but it's a meaningful first step toward a more secure future. Life still comes with pressure, but these new opportunities have lit a fire of hope and determination in me like never before. I now understand that I can't change the past, but I absolutely have the power to shape my future, starting today. Imagine you're standing at a fork in the road. One path is familiar but full of hardship, and the other is uncertain, yet filled with possibility. New beginnings. Karen, too. She stood there heart-pounding, breath heavy, but her eyes burned with determination. Can you feel it? That thrill of stepping into the unknown, of choosing a path with no guarantees. Karen knew that in order to take that turn, she had to let go of even the illusion of safety and walk straight into uncertainty. One of the boldest decisions she made was to invest her time and a portion of her already tight income into an intensive business finance training program. This wasn't just about gaining knowledge, it was about rebuilding her self-worth after a long period of brokenness. Each class, each assignment, no matter how exhausting or discouraging, she kept her goals in focus: financial freedom, control over her life, and a future no longer chained to the mistakes of her past. But she didn't stop there. Karen also chose to start a small side business alongside her main job, an online store selling eco-friendly products. Maybe you've never tried starting a business yourself, but Karen dove in headfirst, with every ounce of courage she had. Can you imagine the anxiety of launching your online store on day one, not knowing if anyone would even show up? But she didn't let fear call the shots. She leaned on patience and creativity, slowly but steadily building her venture. Karen also learned how to tap into new networks, connecting with suppliers, learning from online marketing experts, and sharing her journey on social media to draw attention. Each of those first few orders was a small but deeply meaningful victory, a sign she was on the right track. Can you feel the power of that kind of resolve? Karen is rebuilding her life, one step at a time, with her own hands and unshakable will. She knows every bold decision, no matter how risky, is a brick paving the way toward a more sustainable future. And you, are you brave enough to take that first step? Karen did. And she's not turning back. After months of persistence and unwavering commitment, Karen started to see her first real results, proof that all her efforts hadn't been in vain. The eco-friendly online shop, once just a tiny idea, now had returning customers. Each order didn't just bring in some extra cash, it reaffirmed the value of creativity and perseverance. Her job as a financial assistant was also improving. With the knowledge she'd gained from her training and real-world experience at Mrs. Janet's company, Karen had proposed a few process improvements for managing financial records, saving the firm both time and money. Not only did this impress Mrs. Janet, but it also strengthened Karen's standing and reputation in the company. On the personal finance front, Karen was finally able to make regular contributions to her IRA retirement savings account. The balance wasn't huge yet, but compared to the debt and instability she once faced, it was a major step forward. She was beginning to feel a sense of financial security, a feeling she once thought was out of reach. Karen's social life was also beginning to blossom. Through work and her training programs, she connected with new friends, others who were also working to reinvent themselves in midlife. Their conversations, meetups, and shared experiences helped her feel less alone and gave her fresh motivation to keep pushing forward. But Karen was fully aware. This was only the beginning. Bigger challenges still lay ahead, and there were more critical decisions to be made if she wanted to keep advancing her career and securing her finances. The difference now? She had a solid foundation and a growing belief in herself. Looking back on her journey so far, Karen realized that perseverance, lifelong learning, and the courage to face adversity were the keys to rebuilding her life. Every win, no matter how small, meant something big. It proved that midlife isn't the end of the road, but rather the start of a promising new chapter. It's only when you begin to move forward that the real obstacles appear. That's when Karen realized that the path to rebuilding her life wasn't as smooth as she once imagined. As her online store began to stabilize and her job as a financial assistant gained traction, new pressures surfaced, ones she had never dealt with before. First came a change in California's tax policy where she lived. It directly affected the profitability of her small business. She had to adjust pricing, shipping costs, and tax estimates, all of which cut into her earnings. Karen was forced to reassess her entire financial plan. At Mrs. Janet's company, a sudden restructuring took place when they partnered with a larger corporation. Karen felt the competition intensify as younger colleagues, armed with cutting-edge tech skills and specialized training, joined the team, posing a real threat to her position. At times, the pressure left Karen feeling overwhelmed and directionless. But instead of backing down, she chose to adapt. She sought out a professional financial advisor to help optimize her business expenses and develop a smart tax strategy. Through that, she discovered several tax credits and legal deductions that eased her financial burden. At the same time, Karen dedicated herself to upgrading her digital skills, learning modern financial software, and more effective online marketing tools. Many evenings were spent exhausted, studying and practicing, but she knew falling behind wasn't an option. Another major lesson Karen learned during this period was the importance of staying mentally strong and optimistic. She joined online support groups for people navigating midlife transitions, where she shared her own experiences and found encouragement from others in similar situations. Through these new challenges, Karen came to understand that success isn't a destination, it's a constantly shifting journey. What matters most is how you respond, with initiative, a willingness to learn, and the patience to keep going. Do you feel the strength in the way Karen faces adversity? Her journey isn't over. It's just entering a new chapter, one filled with even more challenges and opportunities. Faced with these new trials, Karen realized that relying on her old methods would no longer be enough. To survive and thrive, she needed to change her strategy, to become more flexible and more creative in how she worked, how she managed her finances, and how she ran her small business. The first thing she did? Optimize her online store operations. Instead of focusing on just a narrow group of products, she began expanding her catalog to include high-demand, higher-margin items like recycled products and eco-friendly household products. This not only attracted new customers, but also helped sustainably increase revenue. At the same time, she heavily invested in building her personal brand on social media. Karen began sharing her story of a middle-aged woman rebuilding her financial life and starting a business from scratch. Her honest posts and video tutorials on personal finance management and small business tips drew a growing audience, creating a supportive community and a pool of potential customers. At work, Karen proactively asked to join new projects involving technology, such as digital transformation and financial data analysis. These were opportunities for her to sharpen her skills, demonstrate her value, and secure her place in a competitive environment. She also adjusted her personal financial plan. Karen started using smart budgeting apps to closely track her monthly income and expenses. This helped her manage her cash flow better, cut unnecessary spending, and boost her retirement savings rate. In addition, Karen took advantage of free or low-cost training programs for midlife professionals offered by community organizations and local libraries. These courses helped her strengthen soft skills, time management, and personal development, which in turn improved her work performance and overall life balance. The most important part of this phase was that Karen kept an open mind and never stopped learning. She understood that in today's fast-paced financial and business world, adaptability is the key to survival and growth. Can you feel the strength and perseverance in the way Karen adapted and reinvented herself? It's those very changes that opened new doors and created new opportunities for her to build a brighter future. After nearly a decade of persistence, growth, and transformation, Karen had not only restored her financial life, but also laid down a strong foundation for her future. She came to realize that success isn't a destination, it's an ongoing journey where each failure and challenge brings valuable lessons. The first thing Karen learned was to never let age become a barrier to personal or professional growth. In midlife, many people may feel discouraged or fearful of change, but she chose to embrace it and committed to lifelong learning to stay relevant. Second, Karen discovered the power of flexibility in both thinking and action. Life is constantly changing, and clinging to rigid plans only leaves us behind. She learned to adapt to changes in technology, policy, and even economic turbulence. Third, Karen came to understand that the true value of success lies not just in money, but in self-confidence, mental well-being, and meaningful relationships. She cherished every small milestone, every genuine connection with others, and every moment of peace in her heart. Karen's vision for the future wasn't just about reaching a certain financial goal so she could retire comfortably. It was about continuing to explore new opportunities, learning for life, and inspiring others her age. She wanted to be living proof that midlife is a powerful time to start over and grow in deep, fulfilling ways. With the wisdom gained from her experiences, Karen no longer feared change. She welcomed it as a natural part of life. She believed that with determination, patience, and courage, anyone can rewrite their life story, no matter where they start or how old they are.